You're listening to the Premier Rockets podcast. It's H-Town Hoops, hosted by Brandon Scott and Adam Spolane.
That's right. It is the H-Town Hoops podcast. Brandon Scott here with Adam Spolane, Austin Mendez producing this thing for us. And this is the first time that we have gathered since the season actually started. We are 11 games into the NBA season, or at least into the Rockets season. They are 7-4. They are coming off of a convincing win on Monday night at home against the Washington Wizards. 107-92, I believe, was the final score of that game. And again, they're 7-4. We're 11 games into this thing. And my big takeaway so far, Adam, is just that the Rockets right now are obviously not perfect. I don't think most teams are at this point, but they look markedly better with, I would say, being the same team that they were last year, but with some of the additions that weren't necessarily there all of last year. Tari Eason among them, Amen Thompson in the role that he currently has. And then, of course, the big part is the steps that Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, albeit on different nights, both have had their down nights and both have had the night where they're sort of the guy and they're the big story of the night. Most recently, it's been Alperen Sengun. But my big takeaway is that things seem to be coming together for the Rockets, and they're playing, I wouldn't say about as well as you could expect, but it's hard to have too many gripes with the results that you have so far, 11 games into it.
Yeah, I'm not quite as impressed. 7-4 is obviously, you'll take that. I thought last night, Monday night against Washington, was frankly a pretty ugly game, and that's not one of those that you're like proud of it. You know, I know it says 15-point win. They were not good in that game. They just took advantage of playing against a really, really bad Washington team. I think coming into the year, we thought that they'd be good defensively. They've been better than good defensively. They're third in defensive rating right now. That's exactly what you want. They want to be a good offensive rebounding team. They are a great offensive rebounding team. Offensively, it's still very inconsistent. It has been very inconsistent throughout the year. There was a time where they were a top 10 offense. They're middle of the pack now, once again, after what was a really bad offensive performance last night. I mean, you have a 104.9 offensive rating against the Washington Wizards. That's not good. And most nights, that's going to get you beat, but they played against a really bad team. So they were aided with that. I do think, though, all that being said, one of my other takeaways is that I don't think there's any question that this is a play-in team. And that picture has started to clear up a little bit here over the last week or so, mostly because I think that when the season started, we maybe questioned the Rockets' ability to get into that top 10 because we figured that there would be 12 or maybe 13 teams that were going to be fighting it out for those 10 spots. And now, as we've gotten through the first, eighth of the season, you're seeing New Orleans really fall apart. They're 3-8 after they lost to Brooklyn last night, and they've lost a couple games to Portland. Like those should be easy wins on the schedule that they're not getting, and now they've seemingly got half their roster hurt. So like you're going to see New Orleans kind of dig themselves into a bigger hole. I still don't think, I know the Clippers have had a little bit of success here recently. I don't think the Clippers are very good. I think that's a team that the Rockets should finish ahead of. So you are, and like San Antonio clearly not ready for it this season. So I don't think there is any doubt. I think now it officially becomes like a serious disappointment if they aren't in that play-in.
So I had a little bit of first of all, I agree with your point about them being a play-in team. Certainly if they play the way that they've been playing through the first 11 games, if they're able to maintain that throughout the season, they should put themselves in a position to be a play-in team. But I looked at last night or Monday night a little bit differently than that, Adam, as like watching it, I'm like, man, this is a game that could easily get away from them because they seemed at times disinterested. And maybe that's not fair, but it had the feel of a game. The crowd wasn't really there. The opponent wasn't really a worthwhile opponent. And I could have easily seen that being a game where the Rockets play down to the competition. And maybe last year or in years prior, they don't get up enough to beat the inferior team. And I remember saying this during the game, like they really need to lock in and not let this get away from them, not allow an inferior team to beat them, similar to a way that I thought they did in the season opener against Charlotte. Like I thought that they showed, and maybe this is some bare minimalist type of standard that I'm holding them by, but to be able to lock in and stay engaged against this team that you're supposed to beat and go out there and actually do it was something that I thought was a kind of a sign of progress, even in the midst of an ugly showing. And I admit to that. It was an ugly game, but I did give them credit for staying engaged. And I thought a lot of that had to do with, some of the pieces that I mentioned before, the Amen Thompsons and Tari Easons of the world, helping them accomplish that.
Yeah, but let's be honest though. If you're going to play down to the Wizards, that's really playing down. Like that's playing down at like it's really hard to play down to that level. And so you saw them go on their runs because just the talent they have compared to the talent on the other side was just such a vast difference. And so when Washington did get the lead down to 6 in the fourth quarter, the Rockets just decided, hey, you know what? Let's just give the ball to Sengun over and over and over again and let him take over the game. And if they're going to just defend him with Alex Sarr one-on-one, then maybe we should take advantage of that. And they did. And he scored 11 straight points, and that's what really put the game away. But, you look at just that back-to-back where it's Washington and you let a 16-point lead get down to 6 in the fourth quarter. It's whatever they were doing in Detroit on Sunday where all of a sudden that game was up in the air towards the end. That's not great. And 7-4, you'll take it. It's a lot better than the alternative, but the schedule has been frankly not that difficult, especially for a team in the Western Conference where they played the Spurs 3 times. They played Charlotte. They're 2-2 against Charlotte and San Antonio. That's probably a little disappointing on their end. They've played Detroit. They've played Washington. Like the schedule hasn't been that challenging. And then you look at probably the best teams they've played, Golden State and Oklahoma City. And, Oklahoma City, they got the doors blown off them in that game. And then Golden State, they played an awful first half. They did play better after halftime, but that's still not one of those that you're like overly thrilled with just the overall effort. So again, they'll take 7-4. It's better than what they could be. They should be a play-in team, but the start has still kind of left me lacking just a little bit.
Let's talk about the offense then, because you mentioned it, and the statistics and just watching the game proves this. They're a good defensive team, but offensively is where they're lacking. It's where they need to improve. What would you say seems to be their biggest issue offensively? Because I mentioned Jaylen Green, not as consistent as you want him to be, but does appear to be taking the leap. We'll talk about Jalen in a little bit. Alperen Sengun seems to have gotten the kick in the tail that he needed, with Ime Udoka calling him out for not necessarily being in the shape that he needed to be. But what do you feel like the issues are offensively? I know last night or Monday night against the Wizards, the thing that stood out was that they didn't have Fred VanVleet, and they were able to overcome that. That's one of the issues that the Rockets still have, is that when they don't have Fred VanVleet, it is unclear of how exactly they're supposed to get organized, or where that is exactly supposed to come from. From where you sit, what do you think is the issue offensively? Is it a matter of knocking down shots? Is it the rotations? Like, what do you think it is?
I think it's purely shooting. And you look, they are, and after, let's see, this does not, I can't tell if this accounts for last night or not, but they are now 31% on wide open threes this season. 31%, and that's by attempting 17.6. So 17.6, that's middle of the pack in the league. 31.3 shooting percentage on those shots. That's 29th. Only Washington shoots worse on wide open threes. Like you have, Cleveland is shooting 49% on wide open threes. The Warriors are shooting 48.5% on wide open threes. So that's a big one on just open threes. And wide open threes are where there is not a defender within 6 feet of the shooter. Open threes is when there is a defender within 4 to 6 feet of a shooter. And the Rockets on those shots are at 32%. So 31% on wide open threes, 32% on open threes. To me, that's a big culprit of why their offense just has not been very good. Sengun obviously had his struggles early on. He's been better here of late, just, not missing bunnies. That was really what was getting him early in the year. But then I think you saw last night, and I've seen a lot of this. I've seen a lot of this over the last, really, these first 11 games about how Van Vliet is holding them back. And Fred Van Vliet is a problem for them, and they need to give the point guard reins to somebody else. And then you see them play without Van Vliet for one night against the third worst defense in the entire league. And what happens? 21 turnovers, a season high. They turned the ball over, Brandon, on 20%, more than 20% of their possessions last night. Entering the game, they were at 12.5%. What's the difference? No Van Vliet. So 21 turnovers last night without Van Vliet. 13 assists, which is a season low. And then the other thing, yeah, they didn't shoot the three ball well, but they only attempted 23 three-pointers. So that's season low. So a season high in turnovers, season low in assists, season low in three-point attempts. No Van Vliet. You saw the difference last night and why they need him. And I do think that might be a little bit of a disappointment, at least early on in the year, because Udoka talked about how they don't want to lean on Van Vliet that much or nearly as much as they did last year, but it still kind of feels like they have to. And I know that people have gotten on him for he's shooting, and he's not shooting the ball well. He's at 28% from three this year. I feel relatively confident in saying that Fred Van Vliet will not finish the season shooting 28% from three.
Well, so I'm somewhere in between here because I'm with you on feeling confident that he's not going to shoot 28% from three. And it's obvious, like there isn't even an argument for, again, them being a better team when he's on the floor, them being more organized, or at the very least, just they don't have another guy on the team that's like that. Just a reliable, dependable, experienced point guard. They just don't have it. But I do take some issue with some of the shots that Fred Van Vliet is taking, or how the volume of shots maybe. And when they're going down, obviously, everybody celebrates it and it looks great. But I wish that there was somewhere, some kind of meeting of the middle of having what Fred Van Vliet offers them as a dependable and reliable point guard, and Fred Van Vliet not shooting it as much as he does. It does feel like they rely on him too much as a ball handler, and they don't have anybody else that can replicate that. But it also feels like he's maybe overly ambitious with the shot. That's just the feeling.
But he's also shooting less than he did last year. You look at just the field goal attempts. His last year in Toronto, he was shooting, let's see, his second to last year in Toronto, he was shooting 17 shots a game. Last year in Toronto, he was at 16 shots a game. First year with the Rockets, he was at 14 shots a game. And then this year, he's at 12.5 shots. So, it's not like he's shooting the ball more. He's bringing the volume down. It's just that he's not making them right now. And I will say, I asked Udoka this last week. I said, is it important? Is it imperative for your offense for him to be aggressive and looking for his shot? And he said, no, it's all about making the right read. We want him making the right read. And if the read is take the shot, then take the shot. And so I followed up, well, more often or not, is he making the right read? And Ime said, yeah, he is making the right read. So I don't think that they take issue with the shots that he's taking. You go back to that first game against Charlotte where he was 2 for 11 from behind the 3-point line. And I went through them. I posted the video of all 11 shots. Two of them were bad shots, but the two, one was a heave at the end of the shot clock. The other was a heave at the end of the game. The other 9 threes, those are shots that you want him to take. It's just that he's not making them right now. So, I get people don't maybe want him to shoot as much, but his usage rate is down this year compared to last year and compared to even when he was in Toronto. And he's getting, so he's not shooting it nearly as much as he was. He's just not making them at nearly the same rate.
Let's talk a little bit about Jaylen Green, because I feel like the leap that Jaylen Green has taken is not, it doesn't always show up in the box score, because sometimes he is not friendly to the box score. He'll have his inefficient game. He'll have his poor shooting game. And Lord knows he's had a couple of them so far this season. But you talked about making the right reads and the right. I thought he was sloppy with the basketball on Monday night against the Wizards, and I think a lot of the sloppiness and the turnovers and the disorganization did have a lot to do with the fact that Fred Van Vliet wasn't out there, and so it changed a lot of the responsibilities of the other ball handlers on the team. But for the most part, I do feel like I'm seeing a little bit more of a leap from Jalen Green. Like what he is right now compared to what he was this time last year. To me, I can tell the difference. And an even bigger difference, that's offensively mostly I'm talking about. An even bigger difference of what I can see is defensively, Jalen Green, just looking like a more complete player. What are you seeing from him so far, 11 games through it?
Yeah, I think offensively, obviously, he started out the season great. The shooting has really fallen off here over the last six. Really, ever since the calendar turned in November, the shooting has fallen off. 34% from the field and 26% from three. Not getting to the line nearly as much. So I think some of the offensive stuff has fallen off, but he's become a much better finisher when he does get to the rim. So I think that's been a big positive. You mentioned the thing with the reads and making the right reads, getting the ball to the right guy, or seeing that extra pass for the wide open three. He's done a really good job with that. He's only averaging 3 assists, but I imagine, I haven't had a chance to look at this. I imagine the potential assists are a lot better. It's just that they're not making shots at this point, and so that's going to bring everybody's assist total down at this point. But yeah, I think that the man-to-man defense has probably been what's been most impressive about him so far, where he's really taking on that challenge of defending not the other team's best player, but he's certainly, like, he wants to be a really good defender, and he has taken that challenge, and he's been a lot better on that end of the floor. So that, I think, is what stands out to me. I think the two things are his ability to get to the rim and his finishing at the rim, and then the defense are the two things that stand out.
Yeah, for sure. And so to me, this ties in though into the Rockets' potential or like how we view them overall. Like to me, a lot of it almost entirely has to do with what is Jalen Green, right? Like what exactly is he October Jalen Green or turn to November Jalen Green, right? And if he can be more of what he was to start the season, which I think even based off of what we're seeing in the more recent games, I tend to lean more toward the way he started the season and the fact that he is making better decisions, the right read, the right basketball play. I feel like the shot is going to fall a little bit better or a little bit more. Now, that's something that we've been saying for 4 years. Like, oh, the shot's going to come, the shot's going to come. And it comes and goes. Like, that's just the reality. He is an inconsistent shooter, an inconsistent jump shooter. It's just a fact. But I feel like with the steps that he's taken and with the development of Jalen Green, that you should at some point see an overall better offensive player.
Yeah, I think you should. And I do think one of the things that has been positive for him is that, like last year, he would have a terrible shooting game, and then he wouldn't see the floor in the fourth quarter because of it, because he wasn't able to impact the game in other ways. You've seen it this year where, like, a night like last night, maybe last night's not the best example because they were without Van Vliet, but even in Detroit, he's 6 of 17 from the floor and 1 of 6 from three, and only gets to the free throw line twice. But he was good enough at everything else to where he was on the floor during crunch time. And really, I think the only game where he wasn't out there crunch time was that Warriors game, where basically all the starters were terrible, and like the bench guys deserve to be out there because they're the ones that brought the team back. And Sengun was also benched in that game. So the fact that he's been out there in crunch time basically every game except for the one, I think that kind of tells you the growth, because you saw it all the time last year. Bad shooting night that would just torpedo his entire game, and he wasn't out there when the game was on the line. So the fact that he's not having to deal with that now, I think that's a sign for his maturity and just a sign for the way that he has played all year.
So I came on here maybe a little overly positive, and you more so even killed on the Rockets 7-4 start. Let me ask you this: Am I not reading enough into how they've played against the good teams? You mentioned that the Warriors game, they start off as terrible in the first half. They respond or a little bit better in the second, or a lot better in the second half, and of course they get blown out of they run out of the gym against the Oklahoma City Thunder, who, to their credit, are the best in the West, or at least among the best teams in all of basketball. Is it, should I read more into, and we talked about this, the schedule not being like exactly super impressive so far, the slate of teams that they've played. should we read a little bit more into how they've played or what they've shown against the teams that we know are going to be in the thick of it?
I don't think so. Just because like they did play a really good game in Dallas. Like I do think that matters. I came away just incredibly underwhelmed with the last 3 games. Where you don't really compete in Oklahoma City. Like that matters. The fact that they were just completely overwhelmed after a pretty good first quarter in Oklahoma City, that mattered to me. And that was an opportunity, and they didn't take it this way. I tried to get them to take the bait after that last San Antonio game about like, is this a measuring stick game? Like you just played these 2 really good games against the Knicks and against San Antonio. Are you kind of curious to see how you guys look against one of the best teams in the league? And like, no, it's just another game. Well, they played like it was just another game, and they didn't play well. And then you go to Detroit and barely sneak by in that game. And then again, I'm coming off of this having just written about the game last night against Washington, 12 hours ago. And I was just really underwhelmed by what I saw from that game, at least offensively. I know defensively they were good, but offensively it was just such a slog. And to have an offensive rating of 104.9 against that defense, I don't care who's out. Like you got to be better than a 104.9 offensive rating against the Wizards. And who knows if Brian Keefe would have sent a second guy at Sengun on those post-ups, maybe that's a little bit different, but he was just content with letting Alex Sarr try and defend Alperen Sengun one-on-one, and that was frankly not fair to Sarr. So that's why I'm kind of tempered a little bit, but at the same time, I've also said that they're a playing team. I don't think there's any doubt that they should be a playing team right now.
All right, so I want to talk about Sengun. But before we really get serious about Sengun, a little lighthearted here. Is there something geopolitical going on with Sengun and the French centers? Like, I don't know exactly all of the history between Turkey and France, or if there's something personal. But like it seems like, and I was saying this on Sports Radio 610 earlier, right before we came in here to record. It seems like when Alperen Sengun sees one of these French cats, whether it be Victor Wembanyama or Alex Sarr on Monday night, it's on site. He is having his way with these French lottery men. What is it? What is it about going against those cats? Is it because they're so skinny? Like, I don't know.
It helps that they're skinny, and but I will say I just Googled France-Turkey relations, and so one of the questions is, does France have good relations with Turkey? And here's the quote: "Our NATO ally France is an important trade and economic partner with whom we have a deep-rooted relationship for nearly 5 centuries. Diplomatic relations between Turkey and France date back to 1483. Jean de la Forest, the first French ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, took office in 1535. So it appears there is no geopolitical thing between Turkey and France, at least right now.
All right. Well, fair enough.
I don't think it's personal. I think it's Alperen Sengun sees these skinny guys in the post, and he says, you know what? If they're only going to if they're not going to send a second guy, then I might as well go to work. And I will say, Sengun's actually struggled a little bit with Wemby this year. I know he had the big 40-point game against him last year, but when he was struggling from the field at the start of the year, like Udoka said, part of it is that he's played all these games against Wembanyama. He's played all these games against Zach Edey. He's played against Chet Holmgren. So that makes things a little tougher. That was a big reason for why he was not shooting the ball from the restricted area very well. But I see the point.
So in terms of him finding his groove, though, it does seem like whether it's the schedule being a little kinder to him or the fire lit under him by Ime Udoka, and I don't know if it's more of a narrative media-driven thing that there was a fire lit under him or if it's just kind of a matter of just going about your business. But it does seem like, Alperen Sengun is finding his groove after a slow start. Like, let me ask you this, is this going to just be a thing that we're going to have to come to accept with Alpi, that Sengun gets off the slow starts? Is he like basketball Alex Bregman? Like, does he need to wait after the first week or two of the season to really be himself? Like, what's your theory on this?
I don't know, because I thought the first half of the first game against Charlotte, he was the best player on the floor.
He was.
And then he kind of faded in that game and then struggled for a stretch after that. But I think some of it just might be opponent based more than anything. He had a really good game against the Knicks. I can't remember. That was against what, Towns? So,
Yep.
maybe that. So I can't really explain. I think that some of why he was struggling was just probably luck more than anything else, where he's not going to shoot 41% from the restricted area all year. And that was really the big issue for him, was that it's not like he was getting into foul trouble. It's not like he was getting, overwhelmed physically. He was just missing bunnies. And eventually the bunnies were going to start to fall. And they did last night. I mean, he overpowered Sarr and to a lesser degree, Valanciunas. He overwhelmed the Detroit centers physically on Sunday, but he did struggle in Oklahoma City, having to deal with Holmgren. So, I'm sure that they would like to have a little bit more consistency from him, and I think that will be important for him down the road, is to become more consistent. But it is a nice little cheat code that you have when you are struggling offensively like they were yesterday, to just dump the ball into him. And that's a really good way to help stop another team's run, is to slow the game down and just let him go to work, especially when he's not going to get double teamed. And I do wonder, Udoka has brought this up a couple times about it hasn't necessarily translated, but they are trying to play faster, and he hasn't quite been up to playing at the speed that I think that they want to play with. And remember, they played really slow before the All-Star break last year. They were one of the slowest paced teams in the league. They started to play a little faster after the break, and then he got hurt. So he didn't really get to experience playing at that fast pace for very long. And you do wonder, if he would not have gotten hurt last year and they were able to stay at that pace, would he have been a little bit better prepared for playing at a faster pace coming into this year?
Or do they have to kind of just slow it down when he's on the floor, since he's their best player? Is fast pace for that second unit, or for that unit whenever Jabari's playing the 5, or when Amen Thompson's out there guarding anybody? Is that the solution, or do you just tell Sengun to step it up?
I think that you try and get transition buckets every time you can.
Right.
If there's an opportunity to try and get a transition bucket, you take it. But if there's nothing there, then you can slow it down, and that's when you get him the ball. Whether Dylan Brooks talked about him as a trailer, and let him get up some trailer threes, and that could be a weapon for this offense. So I think that you're always going to, and when he's on the floor, he's on the floor a lot with Van Vliet. Van Vliet's not going to necessarily be the fastest paced guard. I think that that's something that they want him to get better at, and he did second part of last year. So I think that if he gets a rebound, quick outlet to somebody, try and get early offense that way. If it's not there, then you can wait for Sengun to get back and get in position. But I think that you can do both. I think that you can try and work both angles of play fast, but if the game slows down, let's take advantage of Sengun in that way.
So before we move on, we've talked a lot about what I think we'd agree are the Rockets' 3 most important players right now. And I mean, we could debate this, but talked earlier about Fred VanVleet. Obviously, we talked about Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. I just want to ask you a question before we move on. Talk a little Amen Thompson, talk a little Tari Eason here. Do the Rockets, and it's only 11 games in, this is probably an unfair question. I'll preface it with that before I even ask you this. But I felt this way. I felt like the answer was yes by the end of October, and now I feel like it's a kind of a valid question. Curious of what your answer is. Do the Rockets have an all-star? Is there we think that they're a play-in team. You and I agree there. But is there an all-star on this team?
That's a good question. It's not something that I've really looked at. I mean, you can only have 12, so I can just go through the Western Conference rosters here. Oklahoma City won't get Holmgren on now in all likelihood because he's hurt. So you have Shea, Jalen Williams would be a potential guy. That's 2. Denver has Jokic. That's 3. Minnesota has Edwards. That's 4. Is there anybody else on Minnesota that you would think would be an all-star right now? Maybe Gobert, but I'm not going to put him on now. Portland doesn't. Utah doesn't. The Warriors have Curry, who's just going to be an all-star regardless because of who he is. That's 5. Phoenix has Durant and Booker. That's 7. The Lakers have LeBron and Davis. That gets you to 9. Clippers, probably nobody. Sacramento, we'll see. I mean, they have guys who could certainly make it, but I'm not going to put anybody on there yet. Memphis, probably not. Dallas has Luka. That's 10. The Spurs have Wembanyama. That's 11. So then that would, like, this is a very conservative estimation of who would be an all-star. That would leave one spot open. And I didn't mention Fox or Sabonis, and those guys are always going to be in the discussion. I didn't mention Harden, who will probably have the numbers that could maybe get him into the all-star game. Let's see. I didn't mention any of the Rockets guys on purpose. I didn't mention any of the Pelicans guys because they're all hurt right now. I didn't mention Morant with Memphis. So, like, I think that it is a possibility that they wind up not having an all-star this year. But I think a lot of that is just the circumstance of the conference that they play in. I think that if you put them in the East, they might have 2 guys that could make it. I don't know which two, but you know.
But I also, so all of that is correct. But I also think that Jaylen Green playing like October Jaylen Green is on that list. You know, like that version of him is it makes it an easier argument for him and a tougher discussion about who you take off for him, right? Or you know what I mean? Like you're trying to force him on the team because you're like that looks like an all-star. Now, what is the consequence of this? Like, why am I even mentioning this? I think the difference between the Rockets being what I tried to present them as at the beginning of this podcast and kind of what they're probably closer to, which is, you know, your level-headed take of them being, you know, great that they're 7-4, great for them, but somewhat underwhelming. Like the difference between them actually being what, you know, a lot of the Rockets fans want them to, what I would think all Rockets fans want to be, is the inconsistencies of those star players. Like if at least one of those guys is playing at an all-star level, and I think Sengun last year, even though he wasn't an all-star, that's around what I'm talking about. Like playing around about that level that, hey, maybe you don't make the team, but you've got an argument. You know, the only reason why you don't make it is because the team is not 18 guys on it. You know, and there can only be 12. You know, but if Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, Jalen Green or Alperen Sengun can play up to that all-star level, I think we're looking at a different Rockets team.
Yeah, but
and that offensive issue, which I think is the big issue that ails the Rockets right now, I think is solved by that as well.
But like you said, you need October Jalen Green to show up again, and like they played more games in November than they have in October, and November Jalen Green has been very good. He's been okay. He's been better than some of the bad Jalen Green games of the past, but shooting 34% from the field in November is not going to get it done. I think if I had to pick one, I think it would probably be Sengun would have the better chance of getting there than Green at this point.
Yeah, for sure. You know what this says, though, to me, and again, we're going to move on, but it does, the fact that I am as bullish on Jaylen Green, even with what he's been in November, the fact that I'm as bullish on him as I am right now, I think does speak to how terrible he was to start the season last year. Because I think in my mind, I'm comparing it to that. I'm not comparing it to March Jaylen Green, which was off the charts, because to me that is more of the outlier. You know, like this ridiculous. It also shows you what the potential is or what's actually there. But this is like a thing that he does at the end of the year when the games, and I'm not going to say the games didn't matter at the end of last year because they were trying to make it into the play-in. Those were consequential games. But it seems like, you know, this too little, too late Jaylen Green shows up late in the season, and you're like, man, what is that? Like, where's that been all year? As opposed to, like, this year, it starts off the way you'd ideally want it to look. And it kind of illustrates how bad things were to start last year because it was just god awful. You were wondering. I mean, we were having conversations about should they bench him, and you know, it was just bad. So the fact that he's playing passable ball, even when he's not efficient, even when the shots aren't falling, is like something to celebrate when you compare it to what it looked like. Let's talk about what is becoming one of the more popular bench combinations in all of basketball, and that is Amen Thompson and Tari Eason. Now, I know Amen started the Monday night game with Fred VanVleet out, and look, you're going to get the better, or I should say, the more those two play, Amen and Tari Eason, the more you're going to get people clamoring for one of them to take somebody's starting spot. They should play more. They should start. I don't care about them starting. I just want to see them out there on the floor, and they obviously play plenty of minutes, and it's, they're important minutes because of what they offer you, the defensive versatility, the energy, the effort, all of those things. What have you made of this Thompson Eason combination and what they bring to this team? That to me is another big reason why they're going to be, a hard team to keep out of the play-in.
They just wreak havoc. Like, that's really they're just chaos agents basically. And defensively, they get their hands on a lot of basketballs, a lot of deflections, a lot of steals. That leads to some fast break opportunities. And I think that you want them on the floor probably as much as possible, which I think is why it makes a lot of sense just to keep them both on the bench where they are, just because you are able to increase the minutes that they get to play with each other when they are both coming off the bench. And so that's why I think that they should probably stick with that. Again, both have kind of their holes offensively. Obviously, Eason handling the basketball and some of the decision-making isn't always great. And then Thompson's just the shooting. Though, again, that has gotten a little bit better, and I should probably look this up really quick. He has shown more of a willingness to take those shots, and he's not making them necessarily at a high clip. At least he's shooting it a little bit better from three. I mean, the difference is very negligible, but he's not afraid to take them. He's getting to the free throw line a lot more this year, which, again, that's going to be important. But he's just been more aggressive looking for a shot, and he just makes things happen. It's a guy who's playing 25 minutes a game, and he's getting you 6 rebounds. He's getting you a steal. He's getting you almost a block a game. Like, that stuff matters. And just for Eason, he just makes stuff happen. Whether it's steals, deflections, just ripping the ball away from an opponent, like that sort of stuff is what helps you win games. And we talk so much about pace. Well, the best way to play faster is to force turnovers. And those two guys are really good at forcing turnovers when they're out there.
You tell me if you agree with this or disagree with this. At this point, it is of no consequence because last year's over with. Doesn't matter. But this is just my opinion. You tell me what you think. With a healthy Tari Eason last year, they make the play-in. I think I believe it. I believe that. I mean, how many games did he miss, Adam? How many games did he miss?
I mean, he 40? Basically missed the. I think he only played 29 games.
Okay.
And he had a minute restriction in the games that he did play. He played 22 games last year, so he only played 22 minutes. He played 22 minutes a game last year, and he only played 22 games, so he missed 60 games.
There you go. So that's 60 games without, to me, your highest energy player, who I think it even does a disservice to him to just call him a high energy player. He's a little bit better than that. Now, like you said, he can't dribble to save his. I mean, you don't want him leading a fast break. You don't want him handling the ball for too long. But everything else, I mean, like you said, I think, what was the term you used? Just they wreak havoc, and like, I don't know. To me, you have a guy like that on this team last year, and you are. I mean, they were close enough. They were pretty damn close to making it even without him. I think he's worth at least 3 or 4 wins.
But they finished 5 games back of the Warriors for 10th. So that's the only reason why I pause, is that would that have been enough to make up 5 full games? Like, that's a lot. Making up 5 games is a lot. So I don't know. Like, I think certainly it cost them games not having him. I don't know if it cost them 5 games. So that's the only reason why I'm not sure if they're a playing team if he would have stayed healthy, if he wouldn't have had the leg thing.
Yeah, maybe not. I've convinced myself that he would, because it's not just him. I feel like they are better. Like he what he adds individually is his own thing, but I think there's an energy around it. Like you've got like the teammates are better with Tari Eason out there, with that kind of energy out there. It's something that to me is just easy to feed off of. And look, there's no way to test this theory. We can't go back last year, make them healthy, insert them into the games, and run the simulation. We can't do it. But to me, it just sort of speaks to the value that he brings to the team.
Well, really quick, the last game he played in last year was New Year's Day against Detroit. They won that game. They were 16-15 at that point. So they were 16-15. Let me see.
With his minutes restriction, with him not really fully being right, he was out there with a bum wheel.
So remember, he missed the first 6 games of last year. They were 3-3 in those games, 3-4. So they were 16-15 after 31 games when he didn't play again that year. They were 1 game under 500 in the games that he missed last year. So they were 16-15. He missed 9 games, and they were 4-5 in those 9 games. So it's I don't know if his presence makes up 5 games, but it made a difference because, especially at the time when they lost him basically at the same time that they lost Dillon Brooks, and that's when their defense really fell off a cliff in early January. Is when they didn't have either of those guys, and they went from being, I think they were number 2 in defensive rating from the start of the season to January 1st, and then they really fell off, and January was a struggle for them on that end of the floor. And part of it was because they didn't have Brooks for a good stretch of January, and they obviously didn't have Eason for any of January.
So Jabari Smith Jr. gets a lot of, I see it online at least, a lot of flack from Rockets fans for just not really, just be honest, he does not look like a lottery pick out there. He kind of just looks like a guy out there. Doesn't look like anything special per se. And I hate to say that because I know he's somebody who, they love his sort of attitude and what he brings and that sort of thing, but it's just not, it does not look like how I'm sure a lot of people were thinking it was going to look with him coming out of college, coming out of Auburn in that 1 year. There's some frustration. I don't know. I don't feel like a lot of it is unfair, honestly, but I have reached a point of kind of just accepting what Jabari Smith Jr. is. And rather than like trying to figure out how come this guy isn't a star, you drafted him number 3 overall. He could have been the number 1 pick. Why wasn't he? Why isn't he a star? Kind of moving on to, hey, I just really need him to star in his role. He is a role player, will be a role player until the end of time, but that is okay. Just need him to star in his role, and I can accept Jabari Smith Jr. for what he is, if he is that. What have you made of the season that Jabari Smith is having so far? And is it bad enough to where you would question his spot in the starting lineup, or is it much to do about nothing? What do you think?
Well, he's shooting 25% from 3 and 39% from the floor. So that's what stands out more than anything else, is that the shots aren't falling. If the shots start to fall, then the discussion changes around him. So I think that he impacts the game in other ways. I think his rebounding has been pretty good, maybe not as good as maybe you want it. Defensively, he's okay. Probably a little bit better than some people think he is. He got beat. There was one play last night where he got beat where it didn't look great. But I think that this is very similar to the conversation that we had about Van Vliet. If the shots start to fall, then the conversation completely changes. And so I feel like I feel relatively confident that Van Vliet is not going to shoot 28% from 3 the rest of the year. I feel pretty confident that Jabari Smith is not going to shoot 25% from 3 the rest of the year. I think at some point that shot will start to fall, and some of the chatter will start to lessen. Now, in terms of that starting unit, I wouldn't touch it. I would just leave it as is. That starting unit's been successful. this year. And that's without him shooting the ball well. And he does give them a little bit of a ceiling, or a higher ceiling than maybe they would have if you had somebody else in there, because eventually he's going to start making shots. But there are 11 lineups in the NBA this year, 11 5-man lineups that have logged more than 100 minutes this season. The Rockets starting lineup has been the second best of those 11. And so, like, that sort of stuff matters. And if you are going to take him out, then you've got to put somebody in, and that just messes with roles, and that messes with some chemistry. It becomes a story, and then that becomes a little mental when all of a sudden you've got to ask questions about why you're, starting the game on the bench. So if that starting lineup weren't having success, then I would say, okay, maybe you need to do something to shake things up. But because that starting five has been successful, there's really no reason to mess with it at this point. At least not 11 games in. If he's shooting 25% a month from now, well, then maybe we have a conversation about it. But on November 12th, I think that, and with that starting unit being a plus 6.2 per 100 possessions, just leave it as is.
And to further your point about the shooting 25% from three right now, 39% from the field. For his career, he's close to 33% from three and just under 43% from the field. So market differences from his career numbers versus what he's shooting. Again, 11 games into the season. Look, I don't know if it gets up to the career averages, which even those, maybe you'd like for him to be a little bit better. But I don't know if they get up to the career averages, but you do have to figure that it's going to be better than what it's been so far at some point. At some point, it's got to turn. So yeah, man, it's odd because, like, even in the Monday night game, in the Wizards game, it's like, man, he's got like 11 points, and feels like the quietest 11 points I've ever seen. And it's probably because the shooting is not there. He's not shooting at a great clip. So definitely, I'll say this: acceptance or no acceptance, he's definitely got to pick it up. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, just point blank period. You can't be out here shooting 25% from three and be the shooter that he is or is supposed to be. Like, that's just unacceptable.
Yeah, he was 36% from three last year, 45% from the field. Like, I don't know if he can get back up to that, but there's no reason to think that he can't. It's not like he's got to, it's not like the season's halfway over. It's 11 games. So you should be able to make that up, and, water rises to its own level, or whatever that old saying is. He's also, they want to be a good offensive rebounding team, and he's been more impactful in that aspect of the game. This was a guy who was at, 1.5 offensive rebounds per game as a rookie, 1.8 last year. 2.3 offensive rebounds this year. Like, that sort of stuff matters, and just his size allows him to be more impactful on the glass. And so that's why I think that they're going to leave him out there. And I think at some point the shots are going to fall. Like, I don't think he's going to shoot 25% from three. I just don't.
Reed Sheppard, the Rockets rookie, number 3 overall pick in the draft, of course. He started the season off timid. Is not really shooting as aggressively as I think people would like to see, and I think it's probably impacted his playing time as well. Like, it is not materialized just yet this early on into his very, very, very young career. Does it surprise you at all at the very, not that he's struggled some, but that he hasn't been as aggressive as maybe you would expect somebody with his ability to be? Has his timid start, Reed Sheppard, that is, surprised you at all?
A little, just because when you have that reputation as a shooter, you just assume whenever you see something close to a clean look that you're just going to fire it up. But it kind of feels like he wants the perfect circumstances to take those shots. And if he's not wide open, he doesn't want to take it for whatever reason. And it feels like that. Just take it. And there have been some shots where he's had a clean look from three, and he's passed it off to somebody who might have a cleaner look. Well, no, that's not what you're out here for. You're out here to shoot the ball when you're open. I thought that he was better yesterday. Came over a Steven Adams screen. I think it was back-to-back possessions for a mid-range. Hit two in a row with those. He took a pull-up three in transition. Like, that's the stuff that they want him to be able to do, and that's the stuff that he should be good at. So that was a good sign for him last night. The defense is a work in progress. Again, he's going to get targeted a lot, and he got targeted a lot at Kentucky last year, and he would get beat at Kentucky last year on that end of the floor. But what he would do is that he would always grab at the ball. He had great hands. And so he would come away with a lot of steals last year based off of, guys beating him off the dribble and then maybe not protecting the ball. Well, at this level, they're going to protect the ball a little bit more. So you can't necessarily rely on getting turnovers and steals the way that and ripaways the way that he did last year in the SEC. So I do think that he's got to focus on just staying in front of his guy a little bit more, and they're going to come after him. That's never going to stop. But he's going to compete on that end of the floor, and I think that matters also. So the NBA is hard. I don't care where you're picked in the draft. I don't care what type of a prospect you are when you do get drafted. There's an adjustment that comes to playing at this level, and he's going through it. And I do think that he has played better here over the last week or so.
Yeah, I think if there is a lesson for Rockets fans to have learned by now, so this is not me trying to tell them to learn this lesson. This is one that I feel like should have been learned by now, given where you are in the rebuild and how many players have been drafted, lottery players that you've had over the last several years or so. It's that exact point that you just made. It's not just a snap of the finger and a dude is automatically just a superstar, or it's just all going to come together all at once. Everybody's not going to be Paolo Banchero or Anthony Edwards and just have this undeniable star potential very, very, very early on. And those, of course, were number 1 overall picks. The Rockets don't have any of those on their team. And I know we're kind of splitting hairs there. They got a number 2, they've got a number 3, or a couple of number 3s and a number 4. But it is the lesson of that. The fact that you don't just arrive and just because you dominated your previous level of play, you just on site are going to be, an elite player. It takes development. It takes time. We're seeing this with Evan Mobley out in Cleveland right now. A guy that the Rockets had a chance to draft. They chose Jalen Green, but Evan Mobley is somebody who I feel like people talked about. The conversation with him has gone up and down. Oh my God, he's going to be great, and then oh my God, what's going on there? And then now this year, you look at what Cleveland's doing and how he's playing, and it's back to okay, he's going to be great again. You sometimes you just have to wait on these things. And of course, with Reed Sheppard, we're just talking about being 11 games into his career. But if there is one thing, and it's the reason why I mentioned the timidity, the him being timid, I would say that's the one thing that I feel like he can't be. You've got to at the very least come in here confident in your shot and confident in the thing that got you here, right? The thing that got him here, not just to the league, but got him here as the number 3 overall pick, is being a knockdown shooter, having really good basketball instincts. So he should trust those, right? He should trust those basketball instincts and trust that shot. That is, by and large, the reason why the Rockets selected him number 3 overall. And I also think that a more confident, and this is perhaps going to come with some experience, but a more confident Reed Sheppard and a more aggressive Reed Sheppard ultimately helps them with these offensive woes that we talked about. It's the whole reason why I said that they're not going to be able to keep that guy off the floor, or out of the rotation. Well, they'll keep him out of the rotation if he's not going to shoot the damn ball, right? If he's gonna, if he's gonna be timid, just to go with the theme here, that's the way to keep yourself off the floor, is to not use the gift that you were given, which again fits perfectly with what the Rockets actually need, which is more offense and better knockdown shooting.
And they had the 2nd pick in the draft in 21, the 3rd pick in the draft in 22, the 4th pick in the draft in 23. None of those guys took the league by storm at first. It's an adjustment, and it's just not going to happen in the blink of an eye. And you have to take your lumps as a rookie in this league, and he is. But I do think that he has taken steps in the right direction here over the last week or so. And you started to see, he started out at 16, 17 minutes that first game. Those minutes came down a little bit, but you started to see the minutes come back up again, and he's had a bigger impact here the last week or so.
Next game for the Rockets, and by the time our audience catches the H-Town Hoops podcast, who knows, it might be in the moments leading up to the Clippers game on Wednesday night. But they've got the Clippers back-to-back, actually. Clippers on Wednesday, Clippers again on Friday, and that is when they actually start their NBA Cup play, if you will. If I'm not mistaken, that starts on Friday against the Clippers. The Cup itself starts really as we speak tonight, if I'm not mistaken. So on Tuesday night, but we'll see the Clippers twice in back-to-back games this week. They'll go on the road to face the Chicago Bulls after that. I believe that game is on Sunday. The first of a back-to-back. They're going to do that 45-minute back-to-back from Chicago to Milwaukee, where they'll face the Bucks. Interesting there, and we didn't get into this, and maybe this can come up next week when we talk. Some of these Giannis trade rumors, we've talked about it before in previous podcasts. I feel like we're already kind of on the record on how we feel about that, even though it is topical now. But that's something to put a pin in, certainly, because there's a lot of chatter about Giannis' standing right now with the Milwaukee Bucks. But I tell you what, let's do this again in about a week. Let's circle back and do this again in about a week. They will have played a handful of more games by then. We'll have more data, more of a sample size, and certainly more to talk about with these Rockets, man.
Yeah, for sure.
No doubt. He is Adam Spolane. I'm Brandon Scott. Austin Mendez is producing this thing. Make sure that you subscribe, rate, review. You can also check us out on the Sports Radio 610 YouTube page if you're listening to the audio version of this. Tell your friends about the podcast. And until next time, y'all be good.